Welcome to the Femininja Project. I am your host, Cheryl I Love, middle-aged ninja hiding in plain sight, dedicated to restoring human dignity one person at a time and helping you unleash your personal power. Discover that it's possible to look like a woman, act like a lady, move like a ninja, and think like a warrior. And remember, men are always welcome on the Femininja Project. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Femininja Project, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I have a return guest with me today. His name is Thomas Wurm, and he is the owner and creator of Mountain Mind Tricks, a company focused on life coaching, guided meditation, fitness, and nutrition. He is a Wildland Firefighter, master NLP practitioner, author, coach, sports nutritionist, and fitness trainer. Thomas is also the host of the Conscious Fire Culture podcast. Thomas, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a blessing to be here with you again. And I'm just excited to go deeper into Mountain Mind Tricks and the Wildland Fire community and how we can support them.
It is a fascinating topic. And just so the listeners know, this is the second time I've had you on the show. And if you want to go back and check out Thomas's first episode, it is episode number 121. And the title is Mountain Mind Tricks. And that actually aired about 10 months ago. And you've been a very busy person over the past 10 months.
Absolutely. Gosh, I think, one of the big things is getting some additional training in energy healing was such an amazing thing with Huna, which is like Hawaiian Reiki. And so I've added that to my practice, as well as writing another book and really redefining my podcast. That was a big moment for me. Yeah.
Well, I would like to hear a little bit more detail about all three of those things. So what would you like to start with?
Well, Huna was really something I was looking forward to. And it was an additional kind of training for what I do now with the NLP and the hypnosis and the mental emotional release. And basically, instead of just the psychological view of, working with negative emotions or limiting beliefs, adding in the energy and really going deeper into the spiritual body, it just adds a whole other layer of healing to my sessions. And the Huna, it's a really great teaching because it's 28 generations of unbroken knowledge from Hawaii. And it's a very deep, there's a lot of symbols, a lot of techniques like Ho'oponopono that go much deeper than kind of what we're shown. And really, Huna means secret. So it's really like a secret knowledge. It's almost like a mystery school of Hawaii. And so, that is a lot of what I do, learning how to chant and doing all the things that come from ancient Hawaii. It's been amazing.
You really do like that ancient sacred type of healing and modalities, don't you?
Yeah, I would say it's really, it's kind of all I think about, all I do, all I write about. It's really my jam.
So did you go to Hawaii for the training, or was it something that was able to be done at a distance?
So the first training I went to was, so it's level 1, right? So that was on the state side down in Phoenix. And actually I'll be going to level 2 in Hawaii. It's about 2 weeks in Hawaii of, field trips and training and going to sacred spaces in Hawaii with the Kahuna. And that'll be happening in March this year. So I'm super excited.
Oh, that's exciting. When it's over, I would love to have you back on again and hear more details about it, because I think that that's fascinating and something that the listeners would really appreciate hearing more about.
Yeah, so it's just like Huna, it's very similar to Reiki, but it's very different because we really bring in the 5 elements and working with the 5 element energies. It's really interesting.
So tell us a little bit more about the 5 elements.
So basically we use, as the practitioner of Huna, we bring in the energy into our bodies. So we bring in like fire energy, we bring in water energy, we bring in air and earth. And then also we use Kiave, which is like spirit or ether. If you're heard of like the Vedic traditions, it'd be similar to that. And Kiave is really interesting because it collapses space and time, and it also allows us to dissolve also basically dissolve everything back into it and create new. And so we use the Chiave element a lot for integration or parts integrations or creating harmony between two ideas, as well as just dissolving major traumas. And the fire, the fire element will use that for really transformation. So transforming any trauma or darkness inside the body, and then using the water element for healing. And then the air is for movement. So we're moving energy through the body to get things moving again. And then the earth is like really the harmonizer. It harmonizes all the 5 elements. So
that's fascinating, especially in going through this training. And when I'm listening to you talk about the 5 elements, the one that really, of course, perked up my ears is the fire element, because you deal with fire so much.
Right. And this is why I was so drawn to Huna, because being out there on the line for so many years, for 14 years, by the end of my career, before I retired, quote unquote, I really started to notice or feel like, wait a minute, there's something much bigger going on here. Like the fire is speaking to me. I'm getting messages from the other side through the fire. Like there is such a deeper level of spirituality going on the fire line that I was starting to tap into. And so it really does cross over really perfectly, actually.
So you experienced that. Do you think other wildland firefighters experience that, or is this something that was just unique to you?
I think it's kind of rare because, I would say I'm just so focused on spirituality and energy throughout my whole life that I think it is pretty rare. But I have talked to some other firefighters that do say like, yeah, there's almost like this visceral energy, this consciousness that's out there, because when the fire is 10,000 acres, like it's alive. There's no question. And I think most firefighters would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. There was something that was just popped into my mind, and then it went out right away. So let's just continue. It might just pop back in.
It'll come back.
It'll come back probably at 3:00 in the morning, which is usually what happens. That'll be a little bit too late. I promise not to text you or call you about that. So then let's go on to the second book that you wrote.
So my second book is Awakened by Heartfire, which came out last year. And then my most recent is 6 Minutes for Excellence. Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about those books.
So Awakened by Heartfire is really what I did was, before I left wildland firefighting, I started to do things like speak to the fire or put my consciousness into a hawk and look at the landscape and all those kinds of shamanic type things. And I wasn't really understanding exactly what I was doing until I really sat down and wrote that book and really got the process of how was I doing that? How was I standing next to a tree and praying and then cutting it down? Like, how was this? It was such a shamanic thing that was going on in my life until I really wrote that book and described how I was doing it. And so really at the end of the book, there's a whole process called the Heartfire method, which really brings the reader back into their heart center, back to their highest self, so they can create, clarity and confidence and really be connected to that highest power, whatever they want to call it, that highest self. And for me, I call it the infinity fire, right? This is my term for God in that book, so connecting people with that highest power through nature.
And so that is not just applicable to firefighters, it's applicable to anybody at every walk of life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of my favorite things about that book is I would say every chapter is kind of sprinkled with a fire story. So it is pretty exciting. There's some sort of exciting story that's unbelievable, most likely to most people. And then it's the lessons. What's the lesson in that story?
Mm-hmm. And now you're not going to believe this, but I actually remembered what it was I was going to say a little bit earlier. And that was in regards to your level of consciousness, your spirituality, your interest and curiosity in learning even more and going even deeper in all of these areas, is that you did have a significant life event when you were much younger. And we won't go into it right now, but it was that one life event that significantly changed your focus and the trajectory of your life. So again, I want to remind my listeners, if you want to hear about this story, go back and listen to Thomas's first episode 121, because it is really fascinating. So the way you turned that around to something like what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems like there's definitely been a couple major events like that in my life. And it feels like spirit or creator has hit me on the head a couple times throughout my life. And now I'm
Mhm.
listening.
Yeah, that proverbial 2x4 across the head really
Yeah.
does. Yeah, it takes a while for it to capture your attention. So, whatever possessed you to go into a career as a firefighter, wildland firefighting? That to me is absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, I think most people have that reaction, right? You're kind of the ones running into a forest fire, which is kind of crazy. And as a leader, it's so interesting because you're asking to go march up a canyon with nothing but axes and a chainsaw.
Oh,
And right, it's really the last frontier of jobs. It really is the wild man's job, wild woman's job. And it's so fascinating. But how it started for me is really, my grandparents actually were lookouts during World War II. And they, there's a long love story with that. Basically them signaling each other and finally meeting up in Portland, Oregon. And then my father was a wildland firefighter in California for about 17 years. And so I just kind of grew up with the stories, with the lore, with the excitement of, everything. I feel like it really came down to my dad just telling me so many stories. And what's really interesting, you're going to talk about the 2x4 is after my near-death experience in high school, I really wanted to be an acupuncturist. That was something that I was researching schools and all these things. And I like something came up to the point where, I just didn't have the money to go to school. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll just be a firefighter. And so it's really interesting how this wildland fire career really was a long way around to become a healer. And it's just so interesting. So, that's how it started for me, was the stories. I started doing youth corps when I was 16 years old. So my first summer out in the field was 16, out in the wilderness, building trails.
mm.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I was just going to say that before you did. I was thinking that same thing, that it's really interesting how you started out in a path of healing and very interested in that, and how you took the long road around it. But I think that experience as a wildland firefighter makes you even a better healer than you ever could be, and a true level of compassion and understanding of what people are going through.
Yeah, especially, not all my clients are firefighters, but I would say most of them. And it really helps me connect with them on such a deeper level, that instant
Mhm.
rapport. And yeah, I would say there's so many lessons throughout my career. There's so many things that I went through, so much trauma, so much excitement, so many blessings. And it really did just enrich my life.
Mhm. So you do work with firefighters, of course, and you do work with a lot of other people from every walks of life. What other types of clientele are you working with?
So a lot of times people that are kind of searching for their inner gifts or some sort of, they know they have a spiritual connection, but they're not really sure, or really anybody suffering in silence, any first responders,
Mm,
anybody that's suffering in silence with anxiety, depression, or anything like that. The modalities I use have a tremendous value towards mental health. And it's definitely alternative. It's a different way of approaching those things.
mhm. And you do use a wide variety of different techniques. It's not just one thing, and it's not one size fits all.
Yeah, absolutely. Every client's different. They have their own different medicine, and it's all about just finding what they need and how I can support them. And we do everything from the timeline therapy to the energy healing to nutrition and supplements and
Mhm.
moving the body. And it's just whatever they need, I'm going to support them in whatever way I can.
Mhm. And now let's talk about your podcast, because you've had a podcast for quite a while and you redefined it. And I can't remember the name of the first one, Sacred Ancestry Podcast. Is that what it
Yep,
was?
yep, that's right.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Wow.
so Sacred Ancestry was really about me having fun and just interviewing whoever I wanted and doing whatever I wanted, which is so amazing. And I had so much fun. And I really want to just take it a little bit deeper. And really, what's going on is we're working on a retreat center right now in Mexico for wildland firefighters,
Mhm.
and basically it's a retreat center for sacred plant medicine and also and other practitioners. So integration days, there's chiropractors, massage, acupuncture. I'm one of the practitioners there. And so part of that, part of this retreat center is also the podcast, because what we're doing is we're building a repository or a bank of practitioners that wildland firefighters can reach out to. And so I would say the main theme of it is we're breaking the stigma about mental health and wildland fire, first responders, and we're mainly alternative. We're very alternative. We're going to talk about consciousness, energy, quantum healing. We're going to go and be woo-woo. It's totally open. It's open to like an 11. So
when you talk about changing the stigma of mental health, especially with wildland firefighters, I think that people have this idea that, the firefighters just go in there, they do their job, they go home, and it's over. I think that maybe the general public doesn't really understand how firefighting really impacts the men and the women on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best way I can describe it is wildland firefighting is so much different than city. One, we're out in the wilderness, we're flying in helicopters, we're hiking 20 miles a day. It's just so different. And we're not very seen, right? Nobody really knows what we do or how we're doing it. And of course, things like Boulder that just happened, it's national news. But during the summer, there's so many fires and there's so much wilderness. We're not seen as much as the city folks, right? So there's not a lot of support programs. There's not a lot of things to follow up. But the best way I can explain this, I think, is energetically, where we have all these little traumas of, oh, there's a near miss with a tree. Oh, that helicopter load was kind of weird and made us really uncomfortable. Like, maybe one tire went off a road and we are kind of like almost going off the cliff. You know what I mean? Like those kinds of things that's the day in the life of a wildland firefighter. And so every time we have one of those stressors, major traumas, we're kind of dropping off a piece of ourselves energetically, and it's just stuck there. And now when that firefighter goes home, they're not whole anymore. Their mind is so stuck on those events. They're thinking, feeling, I should have done this better. And it just starts eventually within 5-6 years, PTSD is really common. It just is. And so, recollecting those pieces is so important, recollecting all that energy back and really learning the lessons of those moments. It's huge. And unfortunately, it's not very easy for a lot of folks to open up to that, right? Because we're the tough guys. We got to be the tough guys. We're the heroes. And it's really hard for the community. And it's changing. It's definitely changing, but it's a lot of work still.
Well, and I think it's changing because of the work that you're doing. So thank you for doing that. And I think of you every time I hear about a fire or I see a fire. And in the past, it's probably been 6 weeks. I actually have seen 2 major fires. I was close to one in the mountains, and, fortunately we didn't have to evacuate. That was like a little 2-day getaway that turned out to be like, wow, this is pretty scary. And then another time I was driving to the mountains a few weeks later, and I had to drive past a fire, and I was thinking, should I turn the car around and go home? And then of course we had that huge one in Boulder recently. And it blows me away because I know in an intellectual way how the fire can change so quickly and how it can just explode and go in a variety of different directions. But from a visceral, organic level, I have no idea what that experience is like.
Yeah, and this is becoming a major problem for the firefighters, because I would say the last 5 to 7 years, it's like we've had those things like the campfire that burns down a whole town, like the thing that just happened in Boulder. It's becoming more and more common. And unfortunately, there's not a lot you can do when the winds are 100 miles an hour. You're so unsafe that it's just like there's nothing you can do as a firefighter. Unfortunately, we can try and do some things, but basically at that point, we're just going to do point protection and stay safe. And it's just, there's not a lot you can do in some of these fires. And unfortunately, that's becoming more and more common of like, we just have to disengage at this point. This is Mother Nature's taken over and we can't do anything. And like the things in the fires in Oregon a couple of years ago, in Washington and California, it's just burning down whole towns is unfortunately going to be happening more and more because the landscape is changing. Climate change is definitely a part of it, and it's a lack of forestry management, I would say, as well. Just the fuel buildup it's astronomical out there. And being in Colorado, like Eastern Colorado, the bug kill, that's just a sliver of what's going on in the entire West.
Yeah. And I have to ask, because when you make that decision to step back and, just let it happen, I mean, that's got to be very difficult and even more traumatic for the firefighters, and thinking that you failed or you gave up or you quit. How did you wrap your head around that?
Right. It's really hard, especially when there's homes involved. That's a whole nother level of, I think the risk factor goes way up because the firefighters are willing to go into even worse situations operationally. And this is where we get in trouble. So we get so emotional. And I think for me in my career, I know the public does not want to hear this, but the houses have to be labeled as fuel, right? It's just another fuel type. And how are we going to engage that? And that's the only way you can really stay sane in that time, because it's so emotional. We have homeowners pulling guns on us or yelling at us or praising us or giving us cookies. It's all over the place. People are just so ecstatic, happy or angry. It doesn't matter. They're just all over you and going crazy, basically, because their home is burning. And we have to be operational. So it's really tough in the WUI situation. The urban interface is what we call it. There's so many more dangers. I mean, we talk about power lines, propane tanks, all that stuff. It's a whole nother level when it gets there.
And even with the Boulder fire, I remember listening to one of the, news commentators, or it was probably even one of the firefighters. I don't remember, but they were talking about there was a whole new level then when you have that many homes that are burning of the toxins.
Right. And that's for, wildland firefighters, we're not trained. We have zero training in structure fires. So once there's an ember on a fire or on a house, once the house is involved, we're out of there. We don't have any equipment to stay safe from that smoke, because that smoke is detrimental. It is, pretty much guaranteed to give you cancer later in life. And so we're not trained in that, right? We work with trees and mountains and all that kind of stuff. And so, once you get that many homes involved, what are you going to do? It's a huge issue. Absolutely.
So how long of a career is typical for a wildland firefighter? I would imagine it would be rather short.
Yeah. So basically most people will do it in college for 3 or 4 years and kind of like, oh, that's enough. Some people, I would say 10 years is kind of when people start really having issues with physical or mental health. But generally, the way the permanent primary fire positions are set up is that, if you're a little bit older and you do 20 years, right? So 20 years you can retire, or 25 if you're under 50. So, it is a short retirement and full retirement, which is great. It's just 20 years in the profession is a lot. It's a lot on your body and mental health.
I would imagine it would be brutal.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm guessing that what is the one common characteristic you think that a wildland firefighter has? The one thing, is it a love of nature? Is it just, looking for adventure? What is it that drives somebody to do this?
I think it is the drive for adventure and awe in nature. And I think, most wildland fire folks, they work 6 months a year. And then, before COVID, they'd be traveling the world for 6 months. They'd be in Asia for 3 months, be in South America for 3 months, and then come back. And, they're totally transitory. They're totally homeless, right? That's a huge thing. Like half the wildland firefighters are homeless, right? That's just the way it is. And so people they love adventure. They love mostly adrenaline junkies, right? So they're either rock climbing or snowboarding or skiing or doing all this outdoor adventure stuff, even in the off season. So the other thing too, is they have to be so driven. We are professional athletes, and that is one of the biggest themes, as well as just the fitness that it takes to be a wildland firefighter is pretty extraordinary.
And I understand that there are women that do it as well.
Absolutely. The women are so tough. They're way tougher than the guys because they have to be, because it's so male dominated, and it's amazing. And the women are so good at it too.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So one of the things that you talked about, and we had talked about this a few weeks ago when we were just talking on the phone, you talked about sacred plant medicine.
Yeah, and really, this is something I experimented with before, and I would say for me, I was a little bit skeptical, right? Of like, okay, how can we use this in a really healthy way? And I think some of the research that's coming out of the MAPS Institute with the veterans and the phase 3 trials with psilocybin is extraordinary. As far as they're actually using the words cure in the medical research for depression, PTSD, things like this. So it is really big deal. And so this retreat center that we're working on is, yes, there is plant medicine involved. But what's happening is from my own experience recently is that we're just using a different avenue to reach the mystical. It could be dancing, it could be meditation, it could be plant medicine. It doesn't really matter. Some people, in my opinion, kind of need to be hit over the head with a 2x4, right? And that's what the plant medicine does. It really, really takes you deeper into your unconscious and allows you to kind of see all these different ways of thinking about yourself and these new realizations. And it has it changes your nervous system in a healthy way of helping you release all those stuck things that's in the nervous system. So when we talk about wildland firefighters or first responders, these things really come down to this nervous system injuries. And these plant medicines are really amazing at rewiring and helping the nervous system come back to balance.
I am so glad that you mentioned the nervous system because, that's basically the core of everything that's going on in our bodies and our mind and our spirits and our soul, basically. So I'm wondering if you've ever experienced the sacred plant medicine.
Yeah, absolutely. I did some when I was younger, and I would say last year in October, I had my own psilocybin experience or magic mushroom experience. And that was so profound for me because it really allowed me to go deeper into my gifts and really look deeper at how can I go to the next level. And one of the messages I got from the plant medicine or from the mushrooms was that I have this light in my hands, that I'm one of those people that can touch people like Reiki or Huna, right, and do healing like that. And it was really, I actually went through an experience of healing my own body. And we can go a lot deeper in that if you want to.
Well, I would love to, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. So for me, I think the biggest thing that happened during this experience, I was alone in the desert in Southern California for this experience. And it's really important to talk about intention and ceremony and having a safe space, protection and sage and all those kinds of stuff. It's a very ceremonial shamanic space, right? And really for me, I got to play for a little bit. That was the first thing that happened. Like I started dancing, and that was just so ecstatic for me. Like I love dancing so much, and it's been so long. And really, I would say the next thing that happened to me is that I had a vibration come over me, like my body was shaking, and it felt like a massage chair, right? But my whole body. And so when I laid down just to feel into more of the experience, really I started to have the visuals, right, of sacred geometry just wrapping me up and really taking me on a journey through sacred geometry. And I would say what's so interesting is that vibration just was there for 6 to 8 hours. And it was like everything was just, my whole nervous system was recalibrating. And one of the main things that I saw was this light in my hands, like I was talking about, and I could have, I'd have this migrating pain through my body, and I would just have this light in my hands just touch the pain and really surrender to love and oneness and universe. And the pain would disappear. And I had to keep moving with the migrating pain. And, this was so powerful for me because I had some pain left over from COVID and things like this. Mm-hmm. And it was the next day I was pain-free. Like I had this really weird chest pain since COVID for like 6 weeks, and it was completely gone the next day. And really there was some fear that I was working through on like my Kundalini experience 5 or 6 years ago was so traumatic for me. It was so hard. It was so abrupt. And so I was really afraid to go into this space. I was really afraid to go into the space, but it was such a gentle experience that it allowed me to release that fear of going into that other realm. And it's really hard to explain, but what I could say, I think the biggest thing is this vibration. The vibration really showed me like the universe was just holding me. And I would say by the end, it was almost like I was in a shaman's rattle, and he was just rattling beliefs out of me, rattling emotions out of me, rattling all the stuck energy. And it's just like this rattle is just, it's really hard to explain, right, in words, but really powerful, monumental experience. And I feel like that has been my experience every single time, that it is monumental. Yeah.
So you weren't nervous at first, even being that it was your first time trying it, being by yourself?
No, it's not. I do not advise that to be by yourself. You really need a shaman. You really need a guide. I would say that was part of my work, is to be alone, because that has been a fear of mine, right? And so really doing that alone was a huge integration or self-work piece for me, but it is definitely not recommended. You really need somebody there to monitor you.
Would you do it again?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I'm actually going on retreat this month. So yeah.
Wow. Pretty amazing stuff.
What I've noticed from, because I keep wanting to compare this to the mental emotional release or breakthrough sessions. And I really feel like it's similar in that we are going into altered states of consciousness, right? And looking at things differently and learning a lesson. And that lesson allows us healing to be facilitated. And so it's just it's a totally different form of healing. And I think there's a lot of value to it. There's a lot of value. And I think, honestly, I keep hearing of new retreat centers popping up in the States, like retreat centers all over the world. Like the plant medicine is coming in full force, I think, throughout the world. It's really going to be a big thing. We look at Oregon's new laws, decriminalizing and opening up, psychedelic assisted therapy in the state, like state sanctioned and things like this. Seattle just decriminalized all psychedelics, same with Detroit. So it's really, it's happening.
When you say that, I'm thinking psychedelics, as treatments. And when you look at some of the psychiatric medications that they have on the market and some of the side effects and potential side effects of those drugs, what would be some of the side effects of the psychedelics? I'm just kind of making that comparison.
Absolutely. I would say, to me, like, obviously I'm not an expert on this, but there's obviously a risk for folks that have, mental health disorders or people with medications. Like, there needs to be a really clear screening process. And also the integration can be really hard because the experience is it can be so shattering that it's like you have just grown in consciousness beyond, you've just done 100 years of work, right, in 8 hours. And it's just like, okay, now you have to come back to reality and becoming grounded and connected and really coming back to like 3D. It can be kind of hard for people. And, this is what I struggled with. My first Kundalini experience it took me a long time to become integrated and whole again after that experience. And so that's where the real work comes in. And the risk, there is a risk of, some people have nervous breakdowns through the integration process because it's so huge, and specifically the, ayahuasca does have major contradictions with SSRIs. And that is a very, very serious issue. It is actually fatal, ayahuasca and medication. So it's very careful screening. And, generally though, you look at, like Michael Pollan just had his own psilocybin experience, and he's a very famous author doing speaking now. He wrote the Omnivore's Dilemma, right? And what he was talking about is in all the research that's going on is that these people are comparing the psilocybin or plant medicine journey to being as important or more important than, say, their child being born, to the day they're married, to it is absolutely the most important thing that's ever happened to them in their life. That is generally the reports, the testimonials that you hear from people that experience plant medicine in a sacred way.
Wow. Now, I remember you telling me that recently you had an experience where you were just finding yourself in different positions and almost contortions, and you were just moving your body in ways that you never had before. Was that a result of that experience? Is that when that happened, or is this something different?
Yeah, so that was during my. And what's so interesting, like you said, is I found myself in the weirdest positions. And like I really can't even understand to this day how I was in that position. Like I didn't even know what my body was doing. I was just allowing it to happen. And I, from what I recall, it was kind of like I was trying to stretch out my body or just allow things to move through. And it was so interesting just to surrender to these amazing positions that were really felt contorted in really weird ways. And it really made me think of Feldenkrais, because it was the most interesting way of unlocking blockages in my body, was just surrendering to these weird positions and just feeling through it, and like really just sitting in it until it was comfortable. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes total sense to me. But yes, and not forcing something or not doing a movement pattern or getting into position because somebody is telling you to do it, or telling you do it this way because that's the right way. It's a way of exploration that just opens up a lot more possibilities of movement, sensing, feeling, and thinking. So it's incredibly healing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it had a huge piece with me of releasing a lot of the pain that was in my body from COVID. And so, what's interesting too is I would say after COVID, I was definitely feeling depressed, and I was like, this isn't me. Like, and I knew it was like, this isn't like, there's no feelings behind it. It was just like, I'm just generally sad. It's just like, and after the psilocybin experience, that was completely gone too, which is so amazing.
That's incredible. So
Yeah.
now let's go back and let's start talking a little bit more about something else that you do, which is the NLP, which I find is fascinating work as well and so powerful.
Yeah. So really, it's so interesting because, I'm a writer as well. And so NLP is really focused on words. Everything is so important with the words. And basically, I don't know, sometimes I think about maybe I am doing acupuncture, but we're using words instead of needles, right? Because it's so interesting, because it's basically the way we say things to ourselves creates an image, and that image creates a feeling, and then we create more thoughts, and then it creates the spiral, right? And so it's this whole process and understanding how our mind processes things, how we process trauma, how we create all these problems in our life, basically from beliefs, right? And so the NLP is all about undoing beliefs and creating new ones. And what's interesting is just talking and undoing beliefs, and of course the mental emotional release, which is timeline therapy or more like hypnosis. We're actually changing the nervous system with words, and this is what's it is so powerful. And clients have amazing experiences of maybe they went to the chiropractor for a couple of years, and now they don't go anymore because their skeleton is actually in alignment now, and it's all because of the way they're thinking. And so we really tap into the mind-body connection as well. And it's really interesting how much of a physiological change we can make with just our mind.
I absolutely love the way you put that you're doing acupuncture with words. And I can just see the words hitting the exact acupuncture pressure point, whatever, the meridian, and opening it up. So that's just great.
Right. And so, I would say like the most common belief that comes up, right? Because we want to get to the root cause. This is like the whole thing of the mental emotional release technique, is getting to the root cause. And it's something that the unconscious mind has created that is, when you say it out loud, it's so silly, but for the client, like it's visceral, it's huge, it's inside their body, they can feel it. And it's usually something like I'm unlovable, I'm not good enough, whatever it is, I'm not worthy. It's something like that. This one belief creates this whole spider web of just negative emotions and limiting beliefs and all these things that really just create a lot of problems inside the mind and body.
Mm-hmm. All with words, right?
Yeah, yeah. And this is where, the Huna comes in as well, is that we are, working with energy as well. So that's where it just, to me, it's like kind of a 1-2 punch with the NLP, the mental emotion release, and then the Huna stuff. It's a very powerful modality. It's, some clients tell me that they have a psychedelic experience during our sessions because we go so deep into their unconscious mind, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
really utilizing, again, that altered states of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit more about your books.
Yeah,
Now
absolutely.
you've written 2 or 3?
4 books now. Yeah.
4.
Yeah.
Okay. And the first one in 2019, overcoming anxiety like a hero. Is that
Yep.
the one?
Yep. That was the first one. Yeah. I love that book, and definitely my first crack at writing, and it was such an amazing journey. And then my second one was Awakened by Heartfire, which we talked about a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that book, there was a whole section that was in that book, but I decided to make it separate. And so it's a very short ebook, but it's called Why Science Likes You. And it's all about quantum mechanics and sacred geometry and the structure of the universe, and fractals and things like this. And so I think it's about a 30-page short very scientific, very dense. I did a lot of research with that. And then my latest book is 6 Minutes for Excellence.
I love that book. I mean, I love all of the titles, but I especially like that 6 Minutes for Excellence, because it just shows how a small amount of time you can make such a huge shift in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that book is very targeted for wildland firefighters or first responders being operational and getting back to peak performance. And the title is basically this technique that I learned by myself, like throughout my career, but then I really took the NLP and really maximized it. And that is basically what we're doing is we're doing a breathing technique, and then we're building an anchor. Mm-hmm. So the anchor is like Pavlov dogs, right? It is, so basically we ring a bell and feed the dog over and over again, and soon we just ring the bell and the dog salivates. Same theories, that we're getting the body into a state of being, so excitement, joy, confidence, whatever it is. So we're using an anchor like that. So we're breathing, anchoring, and then visualizing. So we're using the mind to visualize the task, whatever, for my folks, it's like jumping out of an airplane, rappelling out of a helicopter, cutting a tree, right? So we're visualizing it's going to go perfectly, and then we do it, right? And so this is the 6 Minutes for Excellence technique. And I would say that the bulk of that book is all techniques like that, communication mastery, value systems, like learning how to model a trainer, something that's training you, learning how to actually model them and pick apart their brain, like to the point where you know exactly how they do it and why they do it and when they do it. And so basically we can take somebody that, for tree cutting, okay, I'll give you an example. Usually it takes about 10 years to get to that professional, we call it like a level 1 in tree, like being a professional faller at that point. It takes about 10 years. And I feel like with this modeling process, you could probably do that in 6 months. So, but you really, right, it's a very strict process of how do you do it and why and when. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I do have a question for you, that if you look back at that 17-year-old when you were in high school and before you had that experience that you did, if you could have looked forward in time and seen yourself now and what you're doing, what would you have thought?
I don't even know. I don't know if that's even possible without that experience, honestly, because I was so lost. I was so lost and hurt and upset with the world and angry. And like, I think I was just so lost. Yeah. I needed that experience so badly. And I'm so grateful for it. And when I look back there, it's pretty remarkable where I've come from where I was at. Yeah, definitely.
So how can people find you and get a hold of you?
So the main place is mountainmindtricks.com. That's the website. And as well as Mountain Mind Tricks on Instagram. and Breakthrough Writer's Block as well, breakthroughwritersblock.com if you're an author. I do coach first-time authors and have a publishing company that we work with. What else? Thomas M. Wurm on Facebook, and the podcast, Conscious Fire Culture.
Okay, excellent. So I think we've covered a lot. Is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to say?
For folks listening, if they are interested in the wildland fire folks in the community and want to support us in a way, one of the best things is the Grassroots Wildland Firefighters organization. They're actually a political organization that, for instance, they had a huge attachment to the infrastructure bill. We got a huge pay raise and a lot more benefits and a whole bunch of stuff for the wildland firefighters. So donating to the Grassroots Wildland Firefighters is always amazing. The Wildland Wellness Foundation, always looking for donations there to help build the retreat center. And then the Wildland Firefighter Foundation, what they do, basically when there's a tragedy, an accident, or a death, they pay for all the families to fly out, they pay for the funerals, they pay for all the medical bills, they do all that stuff. And that organization really does a lot too. So those three organizations, if you just want to support the wildland firefighters, we're always looking for donations.
So Thomas, if you can send me all of those links, and I'll put them on the description of the podcast, so it's always going to be there so people can support you.
Absolutely. And yeah.
Okay. Well, Thomas, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. It is always fascinating to talk to you. And thank you for everything that you do, not only as a firefighter, but what you're doing to help people now in the recovery phase.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. What a blessing to speak to you again. And thank you. Thank you.
Well, we will certainly have you back again. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And do check out Thomas's website. It's pretty amazing. He's got a lot of information on it. He's got a great podcast, and check out his books and connect with him. I know he would love to hear from you. Do support the wildlife firefighters because it is so important. And as Thomas said, things are just getting more and more challenging. So do what you can to support them and thank a wildland firefighter. And that is the way of the Femininja. And that's a wrap on another episode of the Femininja Project. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, be safe, be strong, and until next time, bye now.